If your high notes are feeling kind of tight and squeezy, like you're taking a big breath, you're exerting energy, you're applying support as much as you think you need, and somehow the throat zone is still feeling like it's doing all the work or like your voice is coming from here, you are in a very large club. This is one of the most common frustrations that we often experience as singers. And the good news is that squeezy, tight high notes are usually not about your inherent ability or facility. They're about the coordination of some particular skills that are pretty straightforward in lining up. So a lot of us are taught that high notes require more support, more effort, or we even intuitively feel that. We think, here comes the high note, here comes the big moment, more effort. So when a higher note feels difficult, our instinct is to push harder, try harder. It's just a psychology that we share. We even think of them, as a higher level of effort. That's why we often reach. It's just the way we perceive of frequencies that vibrate at higher levels. So we take bigger breaths, we give it more torso engagement, more abdominal drive, more overall effort. But ironically, that is often the exact thing that creates the squeezy, tight, uncomfortable feeling. And hey there, if you're new here, my name's Dan Calloway. I teach musical theater, voice, and vocal pedagogy at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. Lots of years kicking around on equity stages and lots of years helping singers get to work on Broadway, national tours in the regions and around the world. And I'm really glad you're here with me today. So as you know, your voice isn't just one thing. It is a set of systems, a whole family of systems working together. Your skeleton, your breath, how that interacts with the way your vocal folds vibrate, the shaping of your vocal tract, the space from the folds to the opening of the mouth or nose, your articulation, and your overall coordination of the body systems. And when one of those systems becomes overactive, like breath pressure, other systems have to then compensate. And actually, I would say when there's any kind of change in any part of the system, the other parts of the systems react. So often it is the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles around the larynx and in the pharynx that end up doing a lot of that work when we're exerting a lot of breath pressure. And a quick note, if you want a simple visual of how all these systems connect, plus a lot of deep dive videos about each system, I have a free voice map framework that you can access below. It shows you how breath, phonation, vocal tract shaping, articulation, registration, all of that interact. And if you want the full step-by-step training, the voice map course is also there for you to check out as well. So one of the biggest reasons that our high notes feel squeezy, tight, unmanageable, rigid is supporting more than we need to, over-supporting. When we push a lot of breath pressure toward the closed and vibrating vocal folds, they have to resist that pressure. So then the muscles of the vocal tract, the tongue, the pharynx, the jaw, the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles of the larynx itself, they often start trying to stabilize things. They have to. And that's when we often feel the grab and the squeeze in the throat. So ironically, the higher pitches often become easier when breath is gentler and more responsive. Another piece of the puzzle is where muscular effort lives in the body. A lot of times we will feel like we have to avoid tension completely. There's like no tension, but then, my colleague Kevin Wilson would always say that the only time your body has no tension in it is when your body's dead, so we don't want that. But the body actually wants to participate. So instead of the throat and the neighboring muscles around there doing the work, it's often helpful to redistribute that engagement into the body. So literally just consciousness into the feet, into the legs, into the pelvic bowl. That gives you the sensation of support without compressing the voice. It's like, sometimes you hear people talk about that technique of like, if you want to increase your charisma in a room, you just think about your feet. It just helps to ground you in the room, and so it takes your energy out of the sort of anxiety zone up here. It's funny too, we get really brainy and thinky. All of our energy sort of bunches up around the head and the upper body, and it's a strange phenomenon, but you can just feel it on a person, even when I'm feeling anxious around the house, the boys and Melissa can feel my anxiety. It's like we can just sense each other's energy. So I feel like a lot of times when we sing, we're thinking so hard and we're up in this area locally, we completely forget about the lower body. I see it a lot of times in auditions as well. I see a singer come in. Of course, it's an adrenalized situation. You're nervous. You want to do well, and all of the all of the energy gets gathered up into the upper body where you feel like the event is happening and you completely forget the lower body. It actually feels scary to think about the lower body because you feel like you're abandoning control in this area. So a lot of little factors with that, but give that a go, just sending consciousness into the lower body. And then you can also think about what kinds of muscular engagements you're going to be using in the lower body, even if it's curling the toes inside your shoes, feeling the calves engage, feeling the quads, the hams, the glutes. Just being conscious of the lower body often helps to redistribute muscular energy from the torso, where it wants to squeeze, into the entire system. That's really helpful. Our higher notes, and all notes really, also require adjustments in the vocal tract. So this can include vowel shaping. This can include forms of acoustic narrowing, and it can also include articulation adjustments. These changes help the vocal tract tune the pitch. This is when we talk about intonation. So there's a whole overtone series that gets created by the folds when they sing the fundamental frequency, and then these overtones are selected throughout the vocal tract and amplified. But the way we shape the vocal tract has a huge impact on this. Sort of the back bounce, or the environment, the acoustic environment being created inside the tract, and that helps the vocal folds to vibrate more efficiently. So when those adjustments happen, the larynx can often become much freer. So our big causes are: how much support do I need? Often we think more is more, and that's really not doing us any favors. Misplacing our muscular effort. So redistribution of muscular engagement throughout the body is really helpful. And also, how are we tuning and shaping the vocal tract? So let's try something really, really simple. Take a very comfortable hum. Then I'm going to open into a vowel. Ah. So now let's try that once with a lot of breath pressure. A lot of breath pressure. And then once with much gentler breath while feeling your feet very grounded. So I'm sitting in a chair. I'm going to just pay attention to my feet on the ground. Gentler breath. I'm thinking about my feet. A lot of times you'll notice that the lighter coordination makes the sound easier. I mean, that's a very obvious thing to do, but notice when I go, even then when I did a larger breath pressure, I thought about my feet, and even that seemed to balance it out. So if I'm going to gather all my energy right up here, and then I'm going to do another really pressurized one, but think about my feet, there's a difference that I feel in energy. That louder sound, that more pressurized sound, actually comes through with a lot more balance. It's really interesting. So if your high notes are feeling really squeezy, these are the first three places to start. So first, reduce your breath pressure. So if I'm singing like D to A, and let's just pick an ah vowel. So if I go so if I'm really pressurized, you see what that does to the voice. And a lot of times the mechanism will want to sort of resist against that air pressure. So if I sing it with a lot of pressure, I'm going to go ahead and pressurize it a lot from my torso. So you can see that my tract is literally, my pharynx is literally squeezing around that note to try to manage the air pressure that I'm sending through. So I'm doing this, to demonstrate what's going on. But if you think about, let the torso really float, let the sternum float up, and then just give your torso the ability, the permission to just give it a very light, gentle support over time. So different sorts of shaping. So that's breath. Let me think about my feet. A little bit of shaky shake here, but I'm distributing down into the floor a little bit with my overall body energy. And now, what's going on with tract shape? I'm giving that shape of that vowel is ma. So letting the tongue sort of back up into the pharynx a little bit, letting the tongue float high. What if I really wanted to sing like ma? So see that ah vowel gets kind of big. So if I modify that from ah to ah, like andiamo, more like typewriter A and IPA. A is really tricky for me. Do you see how it's like, oh, where does it want to be? Or then if I want to do that on an E vowel, a lot of pressure, yeah. So I'm going to think right now. I have to modify this E vowel to an I. Me is going to maintain mode 1. Me. So that's very squeezy, right? A lot of support. I'm like, meh, squeezing it, all right? So now I'm going to maintain the squeeze. I'm going to think of my feet, yeah? Me. It evened it out a little bit. Just thinking about my feet. Okay, now I'm going to chill out the torso a little bit. Me. So there's less air pressure. I'll let my ribs float out a little bit. If I'm going me, a little bit more of like a rib abdominal situation and more of like a contemporary sound. So those are things to experiment with. You see, I'm just playing with these higher pitches. What's going on with support? Let's reduce support, see what happens. What is the effect there? Let's think about the feet. Let's think about the legs. Let's distribute. And a lot of times people talk about bending the knees, sometimes doing like a really sort of kind of like a squat that you would be yelled at for by a personal trainer, where you just sort of like let the knees bend a little bit, letting the torso remain quite supple. That's why. And then being, okay, wait, now what's going on with my tract shaping, understanding acoustic factors. And if you go into the channel and look, there's a whole vocal tract series playlist that I've got in the channel. If you go to the channel page, that I map through specifically what the different elements of the vocal tract are. That'll give you more information on that. So again, how much breath pressure am I incorporating into the entire body? And what's my vocal tract shaping doing in order to interact well with the frequencies being produced by the folds and giving me a favorable acoustic environment? So remember, when your high notes feel squeezy, tight, rigid, undependable, it doesn't mean that you lack facility. Outside of a diagnosis by a laryngologist or an ENT, it does not mean that you lack facility to do this. It usually means that one part of the system is trying to compensate for another. One part of the system may be overexerting while the other part is trying to manage that overexertion. So once you start to think in a systems level, you can start to diagnose for yourself. And once they start working together in a more efficient manner, high notes often become surprisingly easy. I'll call it offensively easy a lot of times. Like, oh, how could it feel this easy? And even still, look, I have tools to sing high notes, and it still always surprises me that these techniques work. I mean, I use them all the time, and I'm just like, wow, that works. So it requires a lot of trust, and my brain still doesn't quite want to believe it. So if you'd like a clear overview of how these systems interact, download the free voice map below. If you'd like the full structured training, the voice map course is in there as well. Remember always, there is only one you, and somebody would love to hear the story only you can sing. Love much. Now go sing.